Hello, and welcome back to the Comic Lyra podcast, where we comically and literally review comics. I'm Ryan, also known as Comic Stan. I love comic books, but my co-host loves regular books, so I make him read comic books, and this week I made him read, didn't add it to the notes, so I have to remember off by heart, it's Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. And speaking of Be Without Fear, is with me as always my aforementioned fearless co-host, it's Jamie.
The irony being that before we started recording, I was talking about something that I'm very slightly afraid of.
Fearful of?
I'm fearful. I fear it.
All right, well, if you want to get to the comic talk, put a timestamp in, but very quickly we have to address Jamie's, would you call it like the unfounded fear? But is it founded or is it unfounded? Well, you be the judge.
I think it's founded. So I have a job, but I also have another job where I serve people beer. At Easter time, we open this establishment up in the daytime, and people can bring their kids and meet the Easter Bunny. I'm the Easter Bunny. I am the Easter Bunny.
I was going to say, can't believe you managed to book the Easter Bunny, but fair enough.
The problem is, some of the parents last year used it as an opportunity to get drunk. I suppose thus are the people who take their children to a pub to meet the Easter Bunny.
Yeah, definite crossover on that Venn diagram.
And some of them got a little, because the bunny suit, right? I mean, I'm in a bunny suit, but the bunny suit has a little tail on it, on where a bunny's tail would be. And so it invited some people who maybe had a little bit too much wine to get a little bit handsy with the Easter Bunny. And the Easter Bunny was not impressed.
Trying to find that carrot.
Well, and this is the other issue, is that the carrot's very visible through the bunny suit. And so I don't know if this year I should tuck so that you can't see the Easter Bunny's carrot, because I saw the photographs on Instagram, don't go looking for them, but you can see the Easter Bunny's carrot through the suit, and it's quite uncomfortable. Well,
I love that. For a second I thought, should we put like for the kids listening, you remember you did that for bloody Santa Claus.
I did.
I was listening to another podcast. I won't say which, but I was listening to another podcast, and they breached the subject of Santa, and they were like, "Oh, for anyone listening, like we're about to talk about things that maybe you don't want kids to hear." Blah, blah, blah. It's like they get into it. It's like, okay, so Santa Claus and whatever, and I was like, this is a podcast where routinely they will joke about like jism and sexual things. Like, now is the time. They're like, if you've got the kids listening.
But no, I get it, because if you've got little ones, right, you still have to like be a person, and like, you know, you have podcasts on in the background while you're cooking or doing the washing up.
Yeah, but if you have like this or the podcast I'm talking about, or even this podcast playing with kids, and then you're like, oh no, they're talking about Santa. Well, it's like, you've already failed as a parent.
But if you're talking about jism, it just goes over the kids' heads. Like,
oh, bad.
Oh, I'm sorry. I heard that as it came out of my mouth.
The worst turn of phrase.
If you're talking about like unsavory topics, you'd expect that the little ones wouldn't know what it was about, and it's just, adults saying funny things. But when you start talking about like shattering their childhoods, yeah, I get it. I get the warning.
Look, all I'm saying is, if you take that approach, you are gambling. Like, you're probably right, but it's a gamble that they're not going to be like, I learnt it from the podcast you played to me as a child. Like, that doesn't look good in the court hearings down the line, you know?
No, the eventual court hearing.
Anyway, well, speaking of truth and justice and
jism.
Yeah, sure, why not? Daredevil, Man Without Fear, one of the biggest Daredevil titles of the 90s, actually from 93.
Right, so it's from the 90s.
Yes, and should we get the credits before we get into how we felt about this title?
Yeah, cool.
All right, well, also we did Daredevil Born Again a couple of weeks ago, so it's kind of continuing that kind of thing. But this was another Frank Miller written comic. He wrote on Daredevil for most of the 80s, then went off, and then just kind of came back for this like one-off 5-issue series kind of thing. But the writing is not the most interesting aspect of it. The most interesting aspect of it is, of course, the art. Did you see who the art is by?
Yeah, of course I did, yeah.
It's
I'm not stupid.
The famous or infamous, depend on who you ask, the John Romita Jr.
Not the worst thing is, Ryan.
What?
I kind of liked it.
I kind of liked it.
There's so much jank, right? There's so many bad faces, and it's so obviously John Romita Jr., but I was looking at it, and I was like, yeah, I kind of like it.
Well, starting with the arting, but because I think normally we do like big over thoughts, but I think we need to get straight into the art because that's the most important part.
There's some bits that I quite liked. So there's like in the first issue, there's all those panels of the two big burly blokes in the boxing ring fighting.
Yeah.
That all looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Kind of liked it. And it did a thing that also happened in the Spider-Man origin story films.
Yeah.
That you don't often see in comics that I really liked, which is like Daredevil workshopping his costume. And I liked all the iterations of like, as Matt Murdock got more into being Daredevil, you can see he was like putting a little bit more effort into the costume until that very last panel when he appears as Daredevil in like the iconic 90s red devil costume, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I think this is just a feature of John Romita Jr.'s art where he doesn't really know how to draw faces.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I was prepared to defend why I liked the art, but with full, like, I think we're on a similar page, acknowledging all the criticisms and seeing them, but just kind of enjoying it as well. I think I've used this phrase a couple of times recently, consistently inconsistent.
Yes, very much so. And again, I think it wasn't as glaring as it was in Spider-Man. Somehow he got worse.
I think there's something there with him trying to do the modern style. Like him trying to do something else and his kind of foibles coming through look worse than when he's just given carte blanche and it's all him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because the best way to describe it is it looks a bit scratchy.
Yeah, it's all scratchy for sure. Yeah.
It's really scratchy and it's not very clean at all. But I didn't dislike it and I went into it desperately wanting to dislike it, Ryan. Of course I did, because it's funny on the podcast when I get angry at John Romita Jr.
That's what I was prepared for. It's why I picked it.
And for the listeners who don't know about this,
we did Amazing Spider-Man from last year, 2022, I think it was.
But we did that that was back at my place.
Yeah.
And the sun was out. So that was like the first summer of us doing the podcast, maybe.
Yeah. And I was like, I quite enjoyed this Spider-Man comic. I wonder what Jamie thinks.
It was the first time I really dunked on a comic.
Yeah.
It was the first time I think it's the first time I really found my voice as a comic book reviewer and was just vehemently enraged by this artwork. And you can go back and listen to the episode.
Yep.
What the listener won't necessarily know that I think we need to touch on here.
Yeah, it's been long enough.
Is that like days after we recorded that episode, John Romita Sr. passed away. And Ryan and I, full of our senses of self-importance, thinking that this podcast was going to have a lot of impact.
Everyone's going to hear this.
Yeah, exactly. We were like, we had a meeting. Ryan and I, we're maybe talking month 3 or 4 of us being podcasters. We had an emergency meeting
at the pub.
I don't even know that I worked there yet.
No, not by then, no.
And we had an emergency meeting and we discussed it, and we felt that the only reasonable and sensitive thing to do was to re-record it. And
no, we didn't re-record it. I just took out some of the harshest criticisms.
Yeah. And
if that makes sense.
If Ryan's up for the editing task, what I would really love to do is, as a post-roll to this episode, is basically just reintroduce my most vehement moments of anger.
Release the hater cut.
Yeah. Can like, obviously we can't just like. Do you still have the original cut?
I've got it somewhere. Yeah.
Can we just?
I will consider it. Based on time constraints.
Can we? If you have the original cut, can we just re-release the original cut as a bonus episode? Because that would be like we can do it as I tell you. No, this is how we do it. This is how we do it, Ryan. This is what's happening. It's happening live on the podcast. If you still have the original cut, we can release it as an unlisted video on YouTube.
Okay.
So it won't turn up unless you have the link for it, and we will put the link in the description of the YouTube upload of this podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to compare what actually got put out and what I actually felt about John Romita Jr.'s art back then there will be an unlisted version of the original podcast in its entirety where I just go off on one.
I think there's a strong chance that'll happen, because whether you realize or not, you have posed a solution that requires the least amount of editing.
Yes.
So there's a strong chance that probably will happen.
If you still have the original cut, it just goes straight up there.
Yeah, depending on the editing required, it might be I just lift the worst part and add it to the end of this episode.
Okay.
So if you're listening, if it's not in the description, it's at the end of this video.
Yeah.
At the end of this podcast.
And what we'll do is, Ryan, if you can ADR, into your calls to action, if you could just ADR in what you actually chose to do, and then I'll be really excited, because I don't remember what I said, but I remember it was scathing.
Well, this is why I kind of just want to take like the most scathing part.
Yes.
And take out. But if I can find it. But yeah, so.
And if I had known that John Romita Jr. had cut his teeth drawing a comic book about a blind man, the fucking fuel that would have given me.
Yep. But
no.
Okay, that would have been.
But unfortunately for me and for the listener, because it is fun to listen to people get real big angry about things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the art here, it's not as bad.
I'll tell you what, I think might articulate for you what I felt. The worst thing I think we can agree, the worst thing with art and comic books is when it's boring.
Yes.
When there's literally nothing to say about it.
Yeah.
It just tells the story and you're like, fine. Because it's maybe the most readable, but it's uninspiring and boring as hell to talk about, right? With this, I didn't know what was going to happen on the next panel.
No.
I didn't know if it was going to be a weird face or way too many lines.
Or just like so many, like John Romita Jr.
You've set yourself on that. It's got to be, what you're about to say has got to be hilarious.
No, it's really dark.
Okay.
In the first couple issues, before Matt Murdock starts wearing the sunglasses, right? When he's first blind, John Romita Jr. doesn't settle on a way to visually note the fact that Matt Murdock is now blind. And so there's just all this weird eye stuff happening, and he never quite works out a way to visually tell us, by the way, he's blind. And the obvious fucking way was just put the sunglasses on him.
Yeah.
Give him the sunglasses. Like, do you not think that is the first thing that somebody would have said to young Matt Murdock is like, by the way, dude, just like slap some sunglasses on that and you'll be golden.
Yeah, we don't want to see your eyes.
Yeah, because, and this is the issue, right? Panel to panel, he cannot work out how he wants to visually represent the fact that Matt Murdock can no longer see.
I think you can apply that to every aspect of the comic, which again,
it's just all over the place.
Again, made it fiercely interesting to scan through, like, and to look at. A classic issue, the classic problem that we had with the Spider-Man one rearing its head here in multiple points was sometimes the faces just look completely bland, expressionless.
Yeah, oh my god, like fuck doll faces.
I've got a prime example of the week, but
we need a comic stands prime example of the week.
And there's me going prime example of that, but
it's the way you have with the word example.
Yeah,
it's like example, like you draw out the A a little bit and you really lean into it. I love it.
I think if I didn't notice it, I'd just say like prime example. But now I'm aware of it. Prime example. Here.
If we make merch,
prime example is the
prime example just across the chest
with
of a
just
black
an arrow
t-shirt.
pointing up, and people are like, "What does that even mean?" But anyway, so scene early on. Young Matt Murdock, pre-accident, he's nicked a policeman's baton with wearing a mask, and he's being a little rapscallion, mischievous, whatever, and he's running away holding the baton. And I'm showing it's in the first issue, the face of a child who's just stolen a police baton and is running away.
But again, the eyes, mate, the eyes are fucking terrifying.
It looks like you've shown a dog a card trick.
You know, in that episode of Rick and Morty, like you've shown a dog a card trick. The only way I can describe it, you know that
That's
episode.
More delay than last week when we remote recorded.
Good job, by the way.
Yeah,
Great job on the editing of the last episode.
Turned out well.
Oh, I do have some historical context bits for that at the end.
Okay. Corrections at the end. I'll make a note.
Well, interesting ones actually.
All right.
But we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
So you know that episode of Rick and Morty where Morty has the crystal that shows you your future, and he's sort of blindly following it to try and die with Jessica.
Yeah.
And his eyes kind of gloss over and glow blue. That is how John Romita Jr. there has decided to denote blindness. And I just like the idea of like little baby blind Matt Murdock with his glowing blue eyes is fucking terrifying.
I mean, it again, to criticize one aspect of like he didn't do this properly. It's like but it fits with the whole thing. That's like
it kind of goes.
He can do whatever he wants.
And I remember just page to page, like flicking through this art and being like, It's awful, and I like it, and I don't know why I like it
because it's just interesting. Every panel, you're like, why did he do that?
And so many blank expressions, many blank expressions.
Also, amongst the blank expressions, really good. Some in ones, so there's some ones where you see the pain and terror on someone's face, and it's like, why can't you do that for all of them?
And he drew I want to call him the Big Show, but he's not the Big Show.
Oh, Kingpin.
He drew Kingpin really well.
Yeah.
Kingpin looks great.
There was a lot of bits where Kingpin was covered in covered in darkness.
Yeah,
right? And it good use to him. He uses pitch black darkness color, and it looks great. When the
best panels are the ones where it's just black.
But it looks it's composited well.
There was liberal use of splash panels as well, back-to-back splash panels sometimes.
And they looked great.
They did. But how did they look great? It's like a fucking stopped clock being right twice a day.
I think it's just, again, if you just let him do whatever he wants, it all fits within itself.
What we need to do is make enough money on this podcast where we can write a story. It doesn't have to be anything special. Preferably one without words, I think. Like a wordless comic book. I've been thinking about this a lot today, actually. Because I'll tell you, I'm in a really good mood. I don't know why. And we need to commission John Romita Jr. to just draw whatever he wants.
Yes, it's free reign, however you want to do it. Change the story if you want.
We give him an Alan Moore script treatment. Here we go.
Just assuming we can. Oh, you mean all right? In this, I thought you meant quality-wise. I was gonna be just assuming we can make an Alan Moore. No, I know what you mean now. Just a ridiculously overwritten for one panel, an entire A4 page of description.
Yes. The way that Alan Moore used to say.
But it has to start with I've got my cigarettes and I'm at my typewriter and strap yourselves in and we're ready to go. It's just tell me what the panel looks like, mate.
I don't know how those comic books turned out so good based on that as the source
Great
material.
Artists.
Really good artists. I think that is it, isn't it? But we need to just send that to John Romita Jr. and be like, hey, we're from the Comic Literate podcast. Don't listen to our Amazing Spider-Man episode. Would you draw this for us?
Yeah.
And then sell it to Marvel for many pounds.
How many do you want? Many pounds. 10, is that enough?
We would like a crisp £5 note each, please.
Yeah. Yeah, I just enjoyed it because it just interested me every point. It just asking questions going through. At one point, the character Stick is there and he's hanging out in the shadows. And the way Romita Jr. denotes shadows in comic is lots and lots of lines. And I've seen other artists use that same technique.
Yeah,
but never looks like this. It's so many. There's parts where he will shadow something and the lines are different lengths.
Yeah.
So the roughness of a shadow on it's never, a straight line or whatever.
But there are other times where it's completely consistent.
Then it's straight line. Or it's just entirely covering the face.
I've discovered a new way to describe it.
Oh.
You remember when teenagers today won't have the same experience because the world is different. But when Ryan and I were growing up in the sort of 2000s, it was quite easy as an underage person to go and get a tattoo.
Yeah.
Sometimes from a bloke in a shed. And do you remember when kids started turning up to our school with the grimiest tattoos that looked like they had been scratched in with a piece of broken glass and a biro?
Yeah.
That's what this comic book looks like.
Yeah, you could get entire bits of this tattooed on you.
Oh, we
People
have
be like,
to.
oh, shame about tattoos. No, that's what I was meant to look.
We've been talking about
getting podcast tattoos.
Podcast tattoos together, 200 episodes, maybe the first monetized episode, whatever comes first.
Yeah, we were
probably the 200 episode.
Yeah. We were going to get good ones, though.
No. What if to show the light and dark that is the podcast, we both get something that we have loved?
So it was going to be Saga tattoos, so yeah.
Probably Saga tattoos. I was thinking Marco's sword or maybe Prince Robot.
Yeah.
You were thinking Goose.
Goose, yeah.
And then beside it, we both get a piece of John Romita Jr. art exactly as is on the comic book.
All right, but you know what yours needs to be, though?
Spider-Man's battered face.
Yeah, exactly.
For the bit, Ryan. For the bit, I will do that.
I'm up for it.
As long as yours is Matt Murdock's glowing eyes.
No, I would get blank expressionless. Guess what he's doing in this scene? like, I don't know, being to read the dictionary. It's like, no, he's stealing a policeman's baton. How could you get that wrong? I tell you what, looking at the art now, though, what he does a good job of is the kind of action scenes.
His posing is quite good, isn't
it? It works within the structure of the comic and everything.
But this is a feature of John Romita Sr.'s art that I love.
Oh yeah, it'd be weird if he couldn't do this. It's weird that Romita Jr. does a lot of the creative choices he makes.
But no, because if you look at like Romita Senior era Spider-Man particularly, just beautifully posed. Like Spider-Man's always so well posed in those. And so, but again, getting the posing right is something that comes from like studying reference.
He's kind of doing it all new from here.
And this is the interesting thing, is that getting posing right always, for any artist, comes from studying a lot of reference. And you just go and find a picture of somebody who is doing the movement that you want to capture and learn how to draw that skeleton, and then you build your character up around it, right? That's how artists learn how to do that. For him to have put all of the work that he clearly has into posing things right, and then not done the same for faces, is just weird. Because faces are one of the first things you learn to draw as an artist.
I mean, I think he learned the basics and then just stopped there.
Yeah.
It's like, has it got eyes and a mouth? Done.
Because for any budding artists, any aspiring artists, the book that you want to look at is Fun with a Pencil by Andrew Loomis. And the Loomis method teaches you how to draw a face. And it's meant to be like a My First Drawing book. This is the first thing that you learn how to do, and it's all faces. And the Loomis method is fantastic. Like, I learned to draw a bit with it a couple of years ago. And it was literally like a friend of mine who is an incredibly talented artist. I was like, how do I learn to draw? And he just went, fucking read this, you twat, and gave me a copy of Fun with a Pencil. And so most artists, particularly cartoonists and comic book artists, will start with the faces, and it doesn't appear that he has.
You know what? Pure speculation. You know, I think he's done is I mean, even this might be wrong, but I think he learned the basics and he does some stuff well. And some stuff not so well. And I think he just continued at that, like at those levels.
Yeah.
Like he didn't improve his weaknesses, but he remained strong in his natural strengths and just did that. But even saying that now, I'm looking at another panel now. So there's a bit in the story where young Matt Murdock corners a gangster, and the gangster is so scared that he has a heart attack, right?
Yeah.
And the facial on the guy while he's having the heart attack, you see like the terror and the panic. So he can do it.
It has its moments, doesn't it?
He just either chooses not to, or he has it in his head where it's like, how would someone look doing this thing? Again, stealing a policeman's baton. They probably just look blank expression.
Completely nonplussed.
Exactly. And you don't know if it's, can he just do it for some reason? Does he creatively just, without even realizing, does he put the effort in certain areas and almost have a blind spot for, pun intended, for not bothering with other parts. Like that, and again, reading it's what makes it so interesting. Where you go like, oh, this is really good, and then you get to another, go, why did he do this? And it keeps you on your toes.
It really
it's
does.
never boring. Like,
no, it really isn't. And yeah, it's very hit or miss.
And
but it's more fun when it misses.
Yeah,
it's way more. And I think. Maybe if we revisited The Amazing Spider-Man now.
See, I was going to say, comparing it to that comic just had large bits of just standard Marvel house style.
Yeah.
So when you've got that, and then you've got blank expression on the face or head that's shaped a weird way or whatever, then you go like, hang on, what? Like, it just makes those errors look worse. Whereas something like this, the errors keep it very interesting because there's so many of them. And then when it's really good, that's heightened.
Yeah.
Because in amongst all this mess and inconsistency and everything, you get a panel that's really good. You go, bloody hell, like, how do you do that?
The jank face is like a delightful little smattering of flaky salt, you know? You're eating a bowl of pasta and then you like crunch through a chunk of flaky salt someone put on the top and you're like, this is delicious. It's kind of the inverse of that, where there's kind of like some standard 90s comic book art, and then there's like a really great pose or a really great piece of action, and then there is a sex doll face. And it's like, what is going on? I think a metaphor for it, keeping within food, yes, we always do. It's kind of like if you ever been to one of those buffets where it's food of the world? Yes.
So it's all of the world. it's imagine going to that and being like, bloody hell, they do like the really good pasta. Like, this is really nice pasta. Or like, oh, really great pizza, or whatever. Like, oh, good Italian section. It's like, what's over here? It's like, god awful sushi. Like, how is that here? Like, that's crazy. It's not even bland. It's awful. But then you're like, oh, but then this bread over here is quite nice. So like, oh my god, look at this curry. It's like, it's pretty good. And then you're like, oh my god, what's that in the corner? Like, it'd be worse if a buffet was bland and boring. Yeah. But you're like, there's some really great stuff here, and I have no idea why they included those.
You just roll the dice, don't you? Every plateful, you roll the dice.
And every panel, you don't know what you're going to get next. And you were speaking of like the having like model, like starting off with like basic models and going off there. I can't help but feel there's a few shots of Daredevil where I'm like, did you make his basic model out of cubes? And then just add a few curves, because there's parts where he literally looks like a stack of boxes. Yeah, like his head is square, his torso square, his biceps and triceps are square, but he still looks like a guy.
I mean, that's kind of in vogue at the moment. This is the Minecraft movie. Also, by the way, the Minecraft movie, I don't think anybody is giving them the credit that they deserve for finding the two boxiest actors in Hollywood,
like Jack Black and Jason Momoa.
Yeah, because Jack Black and Jason Momoa, both cool fucking dudes, both people that I respect immensely, love their work in a bunch of different ways, but they are both just variations on a square.
I mean, Jack Black especially, I don't know if he maybe put weight on for the Minecraft movie. He looks a bit bigger, but I think that's by design.
That might just be age, though. He must be in his 50s.
But then he's done it before where he was in King Kong. Yeah. And it was directed by Peter Jackson. And the last he saw Peter Jackson, he was a big guy. So when he then went to Kong, he was playing a director character. So he was like, I'll kind of model it after Peter Jackson. I'll put on a bit of weight. So then it looks like the kind of like the lazy, like stereotypical 1930s director who's like, yeah, you go do that way. And then he turned up on set and Peter Jackson lost a bunch of weight and he was like, oh, for God's sake. Like, I was going to do it. Oh, never mind.
That's a really funny story that I never knew.
But anyway, so I think we've tackled it as best we can in just describing the chaos of it.
I don't think anything that either of us could say would do it justice, right?
No, it's 100% one of those seek it out.
Yeah, like, no, find it. Find it and read it.
I can absolutely see why John Romita Jr. continued a career with making his name with this. Because it's so interesting. I'd be like, I want that guy. Like,
I want the guy that can't draw a face.
Yeah. But then sometimes can.
It must be a real risk hiring him to draw something for you.
I think nowadays it is that kind of like he's a recognizable name, so just put him on there.
And I imagine that, I mean, based on lineage and heritage alone, that John Romita Jr.'s name on the front of a comic book does shift issues. Yeah. I bet it does.
And I tell you what as well, that Spider-Man series, like, you're a bit of a pioneer without realizing, because you shat on it before it even got terrible. Like, it got, the story alone got like way worse after that. Yeah, like awful. Sales were fine because people were just like, what are they going to do next? Yeah. Like, is that so bad it's good? Well, maybe that's wrong. But the reason I bring that up is there's a character in that who I think we read in. So it was the character who we discover Mary Jane is with instead of Peter. It's a character called Paul. Yeah. And it started a absolute tsunami of memes of this character who's cucking Peter Parker. Like, that's the meme. But there's a single image of this character Paul, of him like kind of smiling, kind of smirking, whatever. And it was that to be like, people were like ironically being like, the greatest character in Marvel, like MCU's too cowardly to bring him in or whatever. And it's this guy's face. And it's I hesitate.
Is it a John Romita Jr. jank face?
I don't think it's I'll bring it. I've got to show you now.
I need to see it.
Anyone can Google this as well. So if you search Paul Spider-Man, it's the first one that comes up. I've seen this image too many times because of how many times it's just been memed.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a jank face.
There you go.
But what's with the goatee?
But the joke just became like people like ironically loving the character. And just that face was all over the memes like constantly.
Oh, fantastic. So, story.
I mean, we've done the art as much as we can, so let's get to story.
Would you like to give us the overview?
Yeah. I mean, one thing I was going to say beforehand as well is this kind of continued a trend in the 90s noise. I don't know when the other one was. Basically, we got to a point here where famous characters or like the most successful characters, people were going back to redo their origins. Yeah. Kind of update the origin a little bit for like the more modern time. And two of the biggest ones of that are both by Frank Miller.
Right.
We've got this one, Man Without Fear, for Daredevil, and for Batman, he did a series called Year One.
Yeah.
And that's like, what was Batman like when he very first started trying to be Batman?
Even as a non-comic book person, I was familiar with that title.
It's the two Batman comics that get adapted the most, even in loose adaptations, are Batman Year One and Batman The Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
Both Frank Miller comics.
Right. So Frank Miller's really important in the Bat universe.
Bat universe and Daredevil universe. Who are kind of like similar characters in a lot of ways.
Their names should be flipped.
Yeah, I've seen that like Reddit post. It's like, if you told me that there was a character who had senses of a bat and a character who used his money and wealth to do death-defying stunts to fight crime, and you told me which one was called Daredevil and which one was called Batman, I'd punch you in the throat.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, Frank Miller, I think he's good at writing those kind of characters. So yeah, this was, let's update the origin for the modern time. It was especially iconic, and we probably should have said this in our, but it kind of applies here. The black suit Daredevil. Like, that became an iconic look in itself of like like you said, the kind of homemade version of a suit. And it's even homemade. He gets it, like, story-wise, he just whips it together in a as quick as he can because he needs to go out and save someone. And the fact that it's iconic for Daredevil especially, just covering the top half of your face with a cloth because he doesn't need to see.
It's a little bit Zorro.
Yep, very Zorro, which is also Batman inspired by Zorro as well. Yeah, it's iconic, and you can see why. Yeah, well, Daredevil is quite ninja-y himself as well.
Absolutely. No, I think, honestly, it's my favorite Daredevil costume I've ever seen.
There's one that was particularly famous, which is called the yellow Daredevil suit, where he has kind of red on the chest, but the arms and legs are yellow.
Does he not just end up looking like Wolverine?
A little bit, but the red kind of makes him stick out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's funny, someone made a webcomic about that where he's like, I'm going to dress like a devil. And then he's wearing this suit. And someone's like, why are you yellow? And then he goes in by himself and goes, what does the devil look like? Which makes sense.
Yeah, that's very true, isn't it?
And speaking of story as well, to jump to the end very quickly, you said before, spoilers, he becomes Daredevil at the end. Like,
does he?
Whatever. But
in an origin story, right? Yeah. Never.
I thought we were going to delay that until even further. But right at the end, he does wear the Daredevil suit, and he says a little bit about, like, I managed to make myself a proper suit, and I managed to sew it together. And the very last line is, hope it looks good.
Yeah. No, that was quite funny.
Great line. So story-wise, again, origin of Daredevil, it's Matt Murdock, young boy, young whippersnapper.
Whippersnapper in Hell's Kitchen in New York.
Yeah. And his dad is a boxer, and unfortunately, he's forced to also be a part-time thug for the mob. And then Matt Murdock goes through the accident, gets blinded, the other senses increase, as we all know the story of. And then it's just seeing him, experience the death of his dad, and then going and that early kind of venturing into vigilante stuff, like hunting down the guys who murdered his dad. And then you see him at university later, Columbia University, learning the law, meeting the Elektra character, which is a big part of his origin. Then just kind of how he gets back to Hell's Kitchen and how he becomes the Daredevil character, essentially. Yeah. What drives him to the vigilante-esqueness of it all. So what did you think of the story? Like, could you focus on the story past the art at all?
Yeah, I could, yeah.
Was there any of it surprising at all? Because, again, you've read some Daredevil now. Was any of it surprising?
It was all pretty generic superhero
origin story, yeah.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I think to actually talk about the story, I'm going to struggle because it's quite a generic origin story.
I think there was a few little bits that I thought were particularly interesting. I think it goes
reminded me, the closest origin story I can think of, and forgive me, is the Joker's origin story in A Killing Joke.
How?
Because everything was just a bit grungy and the mob were involved, and it was sort of like, I wasn't expecting his dad to be a mob enforcer.
Yeah, that surprised me as well.
And, but again, it's sort of, it contextualizes Matt Murdock's strong sense of justice, doesn't it?
Well, what's interesting is there are a lot of moments where they put a lot more into, like, what affected his decisions later in life and the things that inspired that. And the one here is his dad doesn't want him to fight, which I think is a good thing it's a consistent thing of the character where his dad's a boxer, but he doesn't want that life for his son. And he literally, like, I've seen other versions where he's like, I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be something like smart and respected, like a doctor or a lawyer. Yeah. Like, and that's where it comes from. In this, he doesn't want him to fight. And then one day, Matt Murdock comes home. He's like, this kid was bullying me, so I socked him one. A lot of you said the word socked him one, which I was like, that's very quaint. But yeah, socked him one. And his dad hits him. And that's played as serious as it's meant to be. Yeah. And it says like, and then he was hugging me afterwards and apologizing and whatever. But it does emphasize, but the damage was done in that. What's the whole expression is the axe forgets what the tree remembers, that kind of thing. And he has that kind of internal monologuing essentially, but of the fact that the best person in his life that he knew, his dad, could do something like that. It then led him to thinking that it's not people can't just be good and that stops them from ever doing bad stuff. You need something else to stop people doing bad stuff. And that the only other thing could be is the law and, the rules and stuff. And that's what inspires him to become a lawyer. And I kind of I appreciated the extra detail, the extra effort to tie all these things in, but also felt like it didn't feel direct enough to how you get from A to B to C. You know what I mean? I like that inspires him to then not fight at all. And you get him having to kind of be a pacifist even before being blinded or whatever.
Yeah.
But then we get a real loose connection to all this and the Daredevil name. And that was something I thought was quite a stretch here.
There's a moment where it does the thing that you didn't like in the Marvel, 1690 universe?
1602.
1602 universe.
Written by Redacted.
Where it's right at the end and somebody's like, what the devil are you, boy? And he's like, I'm Daredevil. And it's like, when he says, who the devil are you? And I'm like,
who the devil are you?
Yeah.
Not just any devil, bloody Daredevil.
Yeah, and it's like, for fuck's sake.
I literally made a point. I made a note of that because I was like, ugh. I didn't equate it to 1602. I should have, but I had the same exact response to that. But it also felt like he was like, the kids are making fun of me for being a coward, so they're calling me Daredevil. And it's implied to be ironic, like Little John from Robin Hood or whatever. But I also feel like kids, that's like, kids wouldn't accidentally give a cool sounding name. Like, who's that? Bloody Daredevil over there. It's like, that's a cool name. It's like, no, it's ironic. Yeah. It's the opposite because he's a coward. Like,
they're ascribing a level of rhetorical wit to children that they don't have yet.
It's working backwards. It's like, what if the kids made fun of him for it and he has to claim the name back to, wherever. But then it's then revealed later the reason, and again, it's just it's added stuff on, but it doesn't help it. It's revealed that his dad, to make ends meet, did maybe some pro wrestling stuff as well, as opposed to him dressed as a devil character.
Yeah.
But even that is the kid's like, your dad's dressed as a devil and you're a coward. We're going to call you Daredevil. It's it's still way too neat.
Yeah.
You can see what they're trying to do without it kind of really kicking up.
Maybe it doesn't work.
Yeah. Maybe being a bit too pedantic and to look that deep into it. But that's just what I felt while I was reading it.
We haven't addressed the Daredevil in the room though.
Which one? Yeah.
You know which one. Say it with me.
I don't. Again, I think I just completely blank it. I don't realize until you point out if I'm thinking of the same thing.
Say it with me. The fucking narration.
Right. I thought you were going to say censored swearing. I was going to be like, I didn't even notice because I didn't notice last time you brought it up. Yeah, there was a lot of third-person narration, interestingly enough.
Grotty. I didn't notice any censored swearing.
No, I didn't notice, so probably wasn't any. If you didn't notice, there definitely wasn't any.
The consistent, every panel, third-person narration, and it's always bollocks I don't need to know. And again, I remember once I read a book called Fawkes on Fiction. It was written by Sebastian Fawkes, who is a writer of populist novels from the sort of 90s through the 21st century. And he wrote a book, and I read it when I was a literature student because I found it, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's a fiction writer actually dissecting fiction. And he talked about famous characters from history and ascribed character traits to them. And he talked about James Bond as the snob. And he said that he wrote Quantum of Solace because Daniel Craig had another Bond movie in his contract and they ran out of Bond books. So the Bond's estate hired a writer to write one, and it became Quantum of Solace. And he was talking about the challenges that he faced when he was writing Bond. And he said, when I first did it, I put a lot of Bond's interior narrative in to explain what he was doing. I did it as exposition. And reading it back, it made Bond seem ponderous and dim-witted. Like he was slow, like he was having to think through all of his actions. And I think this third person narration has this effect on Matt Murdock. I think if you literally did a single editing pass of this comic book and took out 90% of that narration, this would be a much better book.
Probably. He did a similar thing with, he did first-person narration in Born Again.
Yes.
And presumably that whole 80s run of Daredevil.
But that was the 80s, wasn't it?
Yes.
They loved that shit back then.
Yeah, but if you get a writer whose biggest stuff was in the 80s, and you write some in the 90s, it's going to be very similar.
Yeah.
I think what I recognized here, reading all this narration, was it's no surprise that this is a guy whose most famous non-superhero stuff was Sin City. Because that was like really mainlined detective noir style narration, that kind of stuff. Like, she walked into the bar and I saw her from, like that kind of thing.
That's a really like notable stylistic choice. Whereas it doesn't feel like a strong stylistic choice here. It feels like a crutch.
No, but what I mean is, it's no surprise that he did well in that genre because he's doing that kind of thing.
Because it's what he likes to do, isn't
exactly,
it?
Yeah.
But I don't think it works here. And I think it spoils an otherwise, at moments, really tight, snappy story. So there's a story beat where young Matt Murdock tracks down the people who killed his father.
Yeah.
And he tracks them down and he corners them in an alleyway, and you see them leave the alleyway. You see them enter the alleyway and you don't see anything after. And that's fucking cool.
I thought that was good restraint that they didn't show the death.
Right? It was fantastic.
Because it's from Matt's perspective where he hears that it's happened, but he's obviously not seen it.
Yeah.
So we're experiencing it almost like how he does.
Yeah, exactly. And it was snappy. And it was just really well executed. And then him tracking them down afterwards was super snappy, like great story beats, really well executed. And then it's sort of juxtaposed by all of this quite onerous monologuing, essentially.
Yeah, and not even from the character.
Yeah.
From a third person.
And so, I just felt that it made it feel clunky. And that's unfortunate because otherwise this is quite a punchy little story.
Yeah. That was a great part. Like, he's hunting them down. He's still basically a kid, like
he's
a teenager at this point. And he's kicking a guy's knee inwards, the big boxer guy. And he's scaring the shit out of all these people. Scares one guy to the point where he has a heart attack.
Yeah.
And Matt Murdock's just like, all right, you can see as well. I think it was a really good story point that totally shocked me. I did not see this coming. He chases the last guy to essentially like a brothel, like an illegal brothel kind of thing. And the girls know him there, so they're kind of welcome in. And then this kid jumps through the window and they're like, leave him alone. Like, they don't know what he's done.
Yeah.
Or they do and don't care. And as in the struggle of him trying to get to this guy and all these girls are like trying to separate them, he accidentally knocks one of the women out of the window and kills them.
Yeah.
And I was waiting for oh no, they're fine. Like, or like they're injured, but they're not dead. Like, I was waiting for that. And it didn't happen. She died.
And I think this is a really interesting point. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's really punchy, isn't it?
The reason I think it's so good is if he had because the guy dies of a heart attack and he just doesn't give a shit. If he had killed any of the guys, like actually murdered them, you could see the trajectory of the character. He could have just been like, that would have been leading to real bad guy. Like, it would have been justified that kill and then so on and so on and so on. Whereas here, he has the horrific situation of accidentally killing an innocent bystander, and that not only stops him from being Daredevil for quite a while, but it instills him in that why you should never do that, like why he never kills after that.
And I think this leads us on to an interesting sort of feature of comic books that I've noticed. The Marvel films touch on it a bit better than the source material ever does, which is that we often don't see the collateral damage.
Yeah, the DC films touched on a little bit post from Batman v Superman onwards, because it had, in the Superman film, they show this big fight between Superman and Zod. They're going through skyscrapers. It's big destruction, but you're not seeing any of the bystander stuff.
Yeah.
The beginning of Batman v Superman, Bruce Wayne is in Metropolis, and he's running through all this destruction, trying to save people. Not even as Batman with all his gadgets and stuff. He's as a bystander who's just trying to act in the moment. And he looks up and sees them going through the skyscrapers and stuff. So they did a good job there of like showing like from the perspective of the bystander on the ground. They didn't do much good stuff after that, but that was a good moment.
And this doesn't do it in that big sort of large scale way, but it shows you just like when there are people having life and death fights in the civilian community, things are going to go wrong and innocent people are going to get hurt. And that poor woman didn't need to be kicked out of a fucking window, did she?
Yeah.
And so, I thought, that was an interesting story beat. And it kind of got me thinking about some of the wider stuff in comic books and the conventions, because actually it would spoil our fun adventure stories if we were constantly thinking about the innocent bystanders.
Yeah. It's interesting here that this take place in the 90s when they were just doing darker comics. So stuff like this was happening, like literally like Killing Joke could come out like in the mid 80s and then started to influence 90s comics from then on quite heavily. But you had like characters getting addicted to heroin, characters characters killing, like suddenly being like, they had like evil version of Batman who they tried to make, not even evil version, like killer version of Batman who they tried to like push instead of the Bruce Wayne character, and then people were like, this sucks, and they brought back Bruce Wayne. Talking about what was his name, I can't remember, some French like Jean-Luc something name, whatever, for anyone who cares. But it's interesting here that 90s, I think this is like a better balance of some darker stuff, but there's still that kind of shining light, you know, in the corner there. Like,
it's that fun transitional period where they were working out what the new conventions would be. And to be honest with you, these are the conventions that have largely stood until the present day.
Grey area stuff, like philosophical or ethical, like grey area stuff, which makes it like just more interesting. I think we're kind of getting to the point where that's been spammed quite a lot now, and we're now kind of rooting the new Superman and new Fantastic Four films coming out. I think we want that kind of like heroes being good, you know?
We read a whole comic about it recently, didn't we? Where it was just constantly obsessed with the ethics of being a hero.
The power fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. Really aptly named, actually.
Yeah.
And I suppose maybe that has sort of come full circle now, and we are just ready for some more campy, kitschy fun.
I thought it was really interesting here. I didn't notice this until I got to the end of the comic. I also only 5 issues, so quite a breeze for a read. But by the end, and this kind of ties back into this accidental killing of a bystander thing, was I realized they have not mentioned Catholicism or any Catholic stuff once.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there is only one mention, and it's when Murdock's in the hospital post-accident, and the nun who we later learn in Born Again is his mother, comes to visit him, and he feels the cross, and that makes him like feel better in the moment. But sure, there's no Catholicism, and
so is he Catholic?
Yeah, he's hugely Catholic. Like, it's a big part of the character. Like, a big reason why he has a no-kill policy, unlike Batman, is he really believes that that's a line he shouldn't cross for religious reasons. Like, and he struggles with that in a lot of stuff where, I mean, like Born Again, at one point he's like, I'm going to kill Kingpin. It's not because he's made like the decision of like, actually, I've reviewed my ethics and morals and I think it's actually the best thing. It's just because he's so down and out that he doesn't care about that stuff now. And he just, that base urge to like kill the person who's ruined his life.
Literally lost his religion.
Exactly.
That's quite a powerful.
And then he discovers again in his mum, the nun.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very hard-on metaphor, but it works for that.
It's interesting that they went for Catholicism. Because like, Catholicism's quite sexy compared to Anglicanism.
Yeah, with all the sin, forgiveness for sin and all that bollocks.
And the Latin and the robes and the incense and the chanting.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like a little bit, there's a lot of pomp and circumstance in Catholicism that isn't present in sort of post-Lutheran Christian traditions.
Yeah, and I think, like, speaking as a reluctantly militant atheist, like...
Are you reluctant in your atheism?
I'm reluctant in the sense where I think, like, teenage years, I was that guy who was like, anyone who believed anything, I was like, you're an idiot. Like,
but the humble listener, Ryan doesn't just think that. I remember him in that time.
You were probably there.
Absolutely, you, like, rapidly quoting Bill Hicks to anyone that would listen.
Exactly. Whereas, and even that was dumb because Bill Hicks was spiritual, but anti-establishment, religious establishment kind of stuff.
He was a cool dude.
But as I've got older, it's just got like whatever makes people happy. Like, I'm not gonna, until it gets to the point where people are like, I believe this, so you should do this. Like, that's the limit where I'm like, well, no, obviously not. But people should believe whatever works for them in their life, kind of thing.
Yeah, the only point where I get upset by, when other people's religious beliefs start to infringe on my right to live in a secular society, I get a little bit upset about it.
But speaking as that, I've always liked that aspect of the Daredevil character. I like that, like, how many superheroes are religious? Like, really?
And it's so interesting because Christianity is like such a deep-rooted part of the fabric of American society.
Yeah. I think with this as well, Daredevil just being a devil character, it is like almost like that kind of internal representation of like the whole thing about people wear masks and then they don't feel responsible for their actions. I think there's an element of that here where he won't kill anyone, but he's not that fond of like being the aspect the aspect that he identifies in himself, the wants to inflict harm on people who do bad things. He, I think, sees as a bad part of him, but an inevitable part of him. Like he has to do it. And part of it, and why it works well with his powers, he hears all the bad stuff going on. He can't ignore it. He knows he has the abilities to do something about it, but doing something about it is inherently sinful. Like, I don't think there's a self-defense clause in the Catholic Bible or anything, you know?
Well, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
Well, exactly. So I think part of him adopting, I think that's better than the whole Daredevil thing. I think him adopting the devil persona and kind of indulging in the worst parts of him for the sake of defending the innocent, I think that speaks way better to the whole character, to a complex character, than, well, they called me Daredevil, so now I'm a devil. Like, I think that works better. And there's a great bit in the Netflix series, just to tie this in with all this, it opens with him in a confessional, and he's talking about asking forgiveness, and he says he's talking about this desire to, do stuff, whatever. And eventually the priest is like, sorry, I'm a bit confused. Like, what are you asking forgiveness for? Like, what have you done? And he's like, oh, it's not what I've done, it's what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing of him knowing the things he does are sins in his religion.
Yeah.
And he still needs to do it. And he's just kind of like, hopefully you'll forgive me afterwards, but I got to do it. I think it says something as well to someone who believes they're sinning and endangering their afterlife existence, their eternal existence,
their spiritual health,
but they still feel compelled to do it, but to help people. Like, that's even beyond risking your life. To like, as an atheist risking a life, like, that's even beyond that. It's like, you believe you're going to go to hell for what you're doing, and you're still doing it for selfless reasons.
Yeah.
And that's, again, all this why I'm so fascinated with the Daredevil character. Like, I think he's so multifaceted. I think, again, bringing it back to this title, it's so weird that Frank Miller didn't do anything about Catholicism here, because it's such a important part of his 80s run.
Yeah.
So it's almost like in the time either way, he was just like, I can't be asked to do that spec now again. Like,
well, I mean, I imagine there's a certain element of actually talking about Christianity in America is like quite a touchy subject still. So for our American listeners who don't realize, in England, our king is the head of state and also the head of the church.
Yep.
He's the head of the Church of England. And so we have like Christianity baked into our culture in that way, but we are a deeply secular country. We are the least Christian country in Europe. We're one of the least religious countries in the world in England. We do not give a fuck. You can say whatever you want about Christianity in the UK and it kind of flies. I think some right-wing English people would argue you have to be careful about other religions in a way you don't with Christianity. I think they're wrong. You can pretty much talk shit about religion in the UK and nobody cares.
Yeah.
But in America, that's not the case, is it?
No, I mean, there are what they call them, evangelical right?
Christians, yeah,
like the ones who hardcore believe it. You know?
And there are still people in America pushing for religious doctrine to be part of lawmaking. Happens a bit more in Ireland than it does in the UK. Ireland is quite a Christian country. But I imagine actually bringing Christianity into a story that it doesn't need to be in America could land you in really hot water.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And so on a cultural level, it makes sense that you would just try and avoid it where possible.
But then again, this seemingly is the only Daredevil comic I've read where Catholicism is not a big issue of it. It's just confusing, because if it was a different writer, I'd be like, okay, they just didn't want to do that aspect, and fair enough. It's weird that Frank Miller, who was just doing it really well in the 80s, and then just suddenly couldn't be asked with it for this run. Maybe he was doing so much other stuff, and credit to any writer, especially any superhero writer who goes, it's a bit busy already, I won't do this aspect. Like,
yeah, and what was it we were reading the other day where
Batman,
and we were like,
way too many things.
Too busy, right?
Yeah.
And so actually, if he didn't have the space on the page to tackle it in a meaningful way, and it is something as charged as religion is in America, it sort of makes sense that he would go, you know what, we will make a passing reference to it, we will nod to it politely, but we will also not give it space on the page this time round.
And fair enough. The introducing of the other characters I thought was interesting, like how they kind of portray these different relationships. Weird one was the character Stick. So you haven't met the character Stick before. What's especially odd is Stick is a character who was blind from birth, but he's also part of like this weird underground martial arts group cult fighting another evil group cult kind of thing. Yeah. But blind from birth, but he uses this extra stuff to get around a bit, and then he teaches Matt Murdock how to fight while blind and stuff, but to use his senses as well. But in this one, he's watching Matt Murdock before he has his accident. And I'm like, why? Because it makes total sense why he comes to see him afterwards. Because at normal points I've seen it where Murdock is a blind kid in an orphanage. And and he is kind of recruiting child soldiers for this war against the Hand, which are the evil ninjas, whatever. Incidentally, that's also why the ninjas in the Turtles series are called the Foot Clan, because they were like, just steal that. But
well, isn't Daredevil and the Turtles really linked?
Yeah, so the Turtle creators made their origin to tie in with Daredevil's. Daredevil's never acknowledged it.
That's so sad. That's so annoying.
But yeah, so Stick, it's weird that Stick is looking at this kid before he's blind. It makes sense afterwards because he finds him, and the nuns are like, "Hey, you're blind. Can you talk to him about it and help him adjust or whatever?" And then he realizes,
makes sense.
Yeah, and then he realizes in that interaction of like, hey, rely on your senses a bit more. And Matt Murdock's like, I can hear a radio like 2 blocks away. And the channel it's on. And Stick's like, bloody hell, like,
you're good.
I found a good one here. And it's interesting that he decides that Matt Murdock's too emotional to join this fight. Because of the vigilantism he does. And it's really interesting. I've seen other interpretations where Stick, the reason he doesn't do this is because he comes to care for Matt. So he gets to the point where it's like, I'm not going to recruit you into a war you might die in. I think you're too soft. You're showing me affection as like a pseudo father type. Now your dad's dead. In this one, I don't know if that's, I'm inferring that because I've read that previously. But in here, it's just like, you're too reckless. You can't join. I maybe would have liked a little bit of like maybe it's because he actually cares about him, but I didn't get any of that. So you
preferred that interpretation. Well, that interpretation makes more sense.
Yes.
Because if you were recruiting soldiers and you were like, this one's a bit reckless, you'd be like, yeah, but I can break that.
Oh, it's as long if he's reckless for us, like, brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, he'll more likely do the wild things we ask him to do. So yeah, I think that was a little bit of skipping over. Maybe Miller assumed like, oh, people know what this is and I won't go into detail of it or whatever. But I just thought that was interesting, especially again, thinking of recruiting the kid before he was blind. It's like, well, he's got a dad who's a boxer. Like he could probably throw a few punches or whatever.
Scrap.
What I love what's consistent about his dad is the fact that his dad. I've seen it consistent across all origin interpretations. His dad is asked to throw a fight for the mob, and he refuses to do it, and that's what gets him killed.
Yeah,
I think that's such a good this is where he gets it from as a character.
That's also the story. Every story where there's like a boxer, that's something that happens to him.
To be fair, the only one I can think of is Pulp Fiction. The only one I can think where that happens.
Pulp Fiction. Oh no, there's got to be some. No. Snatch.
Okay, yeah.
Pulp Fiction, Snatch, this.
I'll give you that. You thought 2 examples off the dome, so I'll take that.
Yeah, I bet
there's probably others that have done it as well.
Yeah, I bet if we went for some more boxing movies, we could find it.
I like that, especially here, the Jack Murdock, or Battling Jack Murdock, he's called. He has a string of wins, and he's like, bloody hell, I'm doing better now. Like I'm a bit old, but I still got it, and I can make it to the top. And the mobs are just like, yeah, we rigged those fights. And Balor's like, oh, you bastards. Like, that's worse than being shit. To think you're good for a bit and then be told you actually were shit the entire time. Like, oh, for God's sake. The relationship with Elektra, what did you think of that?
Yeah. It's nice that Matt Murdock has somebody like present in the story who's kind of on his level.
Yeah, that's the main appeal of them as a couple and as a love interest is they're on that same level.
You know the bit where they're driving in that red sports car?
Yeah.
And there's a moment where it's looking like Matt Murdock's going to have to drive. And I was like, are they going to fucking do that?
They do that later as well in the police chasing. Tell you what, that whole scene with like the fighting and the police and stuff, that looked great. Yeah. Like following that and all the fights and stuff when he kicks the glass out of the back and everything, like, and he just looks suddenly very hulking. Like, I don't know if Murdock looked that big the entire time, but suddenly towards the end, he started to become a bit like a bit Hulk-esque.
John Romita Jr.
Yeah. He sized up just for that fight.
Just for that fight, yeah.
I did think that was a cool part towards the end. Just speaking on the end a little bit is he's trying to find this one kid who had been training in the gym with, and she gets kidnapped. I'm surprised how close to this street level stuff that the Kingpin was.
Yes.
Because like you imagine Kingpin, like he's who you eventually get to if you follow like through lieutenants up through the ranks, whatever. But he's like, kidnap a kid. And it's like, you should not be interacting with this like low level stuff happening in your organization.
You should have other people that can take the fall on these decisions for you.
Yeah, and he probably does. It's weird that he's even like having to supervise.
Yeah.
It's like the CEO has come down to McDonald's. It's like, what are you doing there? Like, it's you don't need to concern yourself with that. Yeah. You've got people to worry about that stuff. Yeah. But I do like that it's the beginning of the Daredevil relationship with Kingpin because Daredevil he finds who's kidnapped him and who's kidnapped the kid, and it's a whole ring of these kids being kidnapped and trafficked for all we know, or it's implied at the very least, and him stopping that, and then Kingpin being like, this guy who's vigilante who's just come out of nowhere has cost me millions of dollars. Yeah. Like immediately that's how Kingpin knows of Daredevil. It's like, you've cost me a lot of inconvenience, a lot of trouble. And it's interesting as pairing this with Born Again, you see the beginning of it and then the culmination of it, of where that relationship gets to.
And I remember we sort of, we were reading Born Again and we were like, why is Kingpin that interested in Daredevil? And then having read this, you're like, oh.
And this is how it starts.
He's an expensive inconvenience.
Exactly. And last episode I mentioned we already touched on before, but the two parts that made me laugh, surprisingly.
Go on, then.
One was, we mentioned earlier, that he's wearing the red suit at the end. He says, I hope this looks good. Yeah. And it's like, that was good. There was one that just really tickled me, and it was so out of left field.
I think I know what you're about to say.
He's in Elektra's mansion looking for her.
Yeah.
And he hears that a guard is coming with a guard dog. And it's the end of the page, like the last panel of the page. He says, doesn't matter for me. I love dogs. And then you turn the page and it's him roundhouse kicking a German Shepherd in the air. And it was like such good comedic timing that I almost don't think it was intentional.
No, it's like beautiful that you turned a page for it, right?
Exactly. That's what I mean. It's just like, wow. Like a German Shepherd, like mid getting kicked, like his face is going like halfway the other way. Like, it was just so funny.
If a superhero, by the way, was going to have a dog sidekick,
I mean, Superman does have one.
Yeah,
and he's making
Crypto.
His cinematic debut. Yeah, it's coming up. Old Batman has Ace the Bat Hound, who's like a bloodhound.
Yes, but if any superhero was going to have a dog, Matt Murdock would be the one, wouldn't he?
I think I was about to say I think that'd be a bit too on the nose. But they do a lot of on the nose blind stuff with Daredevil, like his billy clubs like form into the walking stick, and he wears the glasses and everything.
It's all very on the nose.
I mean you could. I don't know how people would feel about that. I tell you what though, now you've mentioned it, I'm surprised they haven't done it already. That's the realization. I feel like of course he should have a dog, like for all the other stuff they do. Maybe he should. Maybe the next writer hopefully will give Daredevil the sidekick. What would you call it though? That's the problem. You gotta have a good snappy name for it.
You'd call it Devil Dog.
Call it a day then.
I mean, that's as good as Dogpool.
Oh yeah, but Dogpool's ironically bad.
Dogpool is played off for comedy.
Yeah, as are all the Deadpool variants. I don't know. Guide, something in Guide.
Guide. It could be Guy Dog.
Guide Dog.
Guy Dog. That's what he's called. He's Guy Dog.
Get him, Guy.
Yeah, because he only ever calls him Guy, and then at a certain point you find out that the dog's surname is Dog.
Yeah. What's his surname? Is it Devil? Is it Guy Devil? No, it's Guy Dog. Like, okay, I see what you've done there.
We did it. We worked it out.
Well, that's as good a place as any to end the comic talk. You did say you wanted to finish off with some corrections from last week.
Well, yeah. So
the listeners are absolutely ravenous for this.
So our historical correspondent reached out.
Oh, well.
The Amazons apparently existed near to the ancient Greeks. So Homer talks about them. Homer being a Greek philosopher, writer, historian, chap.
So are the Amazons a real real in mythological history race of women soldiers, like warriors? Like, is that what they are in the Greek?
It's shaky because they were apparent. So our historical correspondent didn't get into that much detail, but he said that Homer observed them.
They did.
Yeah, but a lot of historians think that they were actually mythological. And so it sort of seeps into the history, and Homer writes about them, but also a lot of historians now think that it was largely apocryphal.
Okay.
But their addition in, like, making her an Amazonian and then setting the story in ancient Greece made as much historical sense as it could.
Yes,
essentially. So it was very fitting
that the Amazons would be tied to and interacting with Greek gods as they exist in the DC universe. Makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, apparently. Yeah. Annoyingly, I would love to read out the whole thing he sent me, but my phone died. So I can't be asked to plug it in and wait for it to charge.
You've got the essence of it. You've got the the important stuff across, and I think that's what matters, really.
Yeah,
I'll give you a solid B-.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And anytime. Well, that being said, I think we've done all we can for this week, and it's interesting doing it in person again. It felt weird not having seen you in person for 2 weeks this time.
It did feel weird, didn't it? But it's a necessary evil.
Yeah, we're back on track, and we've got nothing planned for the next few weeks, so they're going to be kind of wild card.
I think we should do.
Okay.
I don't actually think we should do this, but I just wanted to mention it. Strange Love, man. DC Strange Love.
The amount of one-off random one-shot comics from Marvel and DC that do not get any attention whatsoever and just die a very quiet death without ever being acknowledged. And you managed to find one of those. Like, we should do an episode about this.
Well, it was because you released a short, great short, by the way. Everyone should go onto our TikTok and watch it, about Red Falcon.
Yep. The cowards for not doing a proper Falcon.
And then one of the comments said, nothing on Eagly. And I was like, oh, Eagly, I recognize that name. And
I saw this. I wondered, do you know who they mean by Eagly?
Well, it's an eagle.
Yeah. Do you know where they're from?
No.
They're from the Peacemaker TV show that's part of the James Gunn-verse DC universe.
Oh.
He has a pet eagle. John Cena's Peacemaker has a pet eagle.
Oh.
You know what? There's a Peacemaker comic that I read not too long ago. I wonder if Eagly is in that.
Well, what I was thinking we should do is just, like, based on maybe 20 minutes of research each, just like, you know, if we both bring 2 or 3 choice Marvel and DC one-shot anthology comics to an episode.
I mean, there's a lot to choose from. Like, I don't know where I would start, like, to what to do.
Best Marvel anthology, worst Marvel anthology, 2 Google searches, best and worst DC anthologies.
All right, so we're going to do like a mixer kind of one. We just need to pick things that try and make it look like an interesting episode at the very least. Yeah. Like a kind of a headline kind of thing.
Yeah, because, I mean, whenever we've done, like, DC and Marvel one-offs, I've always really enjoyed talking about them, like the Father Christmas one for the X-Men, the Man Who Has Everything. Like, they're always kind of fun.
I'll tell you what, looking up, there is a comic, it might be a one-shot, I don't know if it is. There's something about, the miniseries issue 1 of 5 and one's only come out, but it is about Eagly, the character. So
Can
we'll
we
have to do that at some
Eagly
point.
stuff?
Yeah. And it's DC Black Label as well, so that's where they do like the proper swearing and stuff.
Oh, the real swearing. I want the fucking swearing.
Yeah, we'll find something interesting to do next week.
But we can do some Eagly.
We can do some Eagly at some point, and I feel like we need to now because we've set it up. But yeah, we will do something interesting next week, and the weeks coming in afterwards, and then in a couple of weeks we'll do something time with the Thunderbolts. which I think I've got something really interesting planned, which I'm eager to see what your reaction. It's something I've not even read.
Is it Nightwing?
No, it's not Nightwing, because it's Marvel, so it's not.
Well, but why are we doing anything that isn't Nightwing, Ryan?
That Nightwing run is coming to an end soon. So we
can
could
we do the end?
Yeah, we could do the end. I'll find out when exactly it's ending, and we can do it when it actually ends. So
we can do some more Dick Grayson.
We could be like, there are a comic series that we read a couple of issues of at one point a year ago, and now we're getting to the end, and we're paying you the proper homage you deserve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that's us wrapped up. So why don't you say bye before the pre-recorded calls to action?
Bye.
And thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe to get notified of our future episodes as well. And if you're feeling particularly generous, then please leave a 5-star review on whatever podcast app you're using. If you'd like to get in contact with us, then send an email to comiclit@gmail.com. You can also watch videos by me on the Comic Stand YouTube page, which is linked in the description. Thank you, goodbye.